The Night of Blood, inside the Bataclan Massacre. Subscribe for more real crime stories. Like, share, and join the discussion below. Screams filled the air like thunder rolling through the duck halls of the Bataclan Theatre. The music had stopped, replaced by the sound of a chaos, broken glass, and terrified cries. In those few seconds, a place that had been alive with laughter and song turned into a scene of pure horror. The crowd of hundreds, packed tightly under the flashing stage lights, dropped to the floor as gunfire erupted from the back of the hall. People ran for the exits, tripping over one another, desperate to survive. In the middle of it all, Emma Johnson, a 22-year-old American college student studying abroad in Paris, clutched her friend's hand, whispering, "Don't move. Stay quiet." Her voice trembled, her heartbeat louder than the screams. Just hours earlier, Emma and her friends had been excited to see the concert. The Bataclan was a popular venue. Music, laughter, and energy always filled its walls. The crowd was singing along to their favorite songs, recording videos, waving their phones in the air. It was supposed to be the best night of their semester abroad. None of them could imagine that within minutes it would become one of the darkest nights in modern history. Outside, the streets of Paris were calm, glowing under yellow street lights. People were dining in cafes, unaware of the nightmare unfolding inside the theatre. When the first shots echoed, nearby passers-by thought they were fireworks, until they saw people running, screaming for help. Police sirens began to wail in the distance, closing in. Inside, Emma's group huddled behind rows of overturned seats. The music equipment lay shattered on the stage, the microphones still buzzing faintly through the speakers. The attackers moved through the hall with cold precision, shouting in Lois, languages Emma didn't understand. Every sound made her flinch. A phone vibrated nearby, its ringtone slicing through the silence. And instantly, gunfire followed. Minutes felt like hours. Some managed to crawl toward emergency doors, slipping through dark corridors. Others were trapped, frozen with fear. Emma's eyes darted toward an exit sign flickering in red. Her friend Jacob whispered, "Now or never." They started to move, inch by inch, their breaths shallow, their bodies shaking. Then suddenly, the door burst open. Armed police stormed inside, shouting commands. A flash of gunfire erupted, echoing like lightning striking stone. Emma screamed, covering her ears as the scene turned into a blur of lights and chaos. And just as she thought they might finally be saved, another explosion shook the building. Everything went black. When Emma opened her eyes, the air was thick with dust and smoke. The once bright concert hall was now a shadowed ruin. The golden lights that had once glowed over the crowd were gone. Only the red glow of emergency alarms flashed through the haze. Somewhere close, she could hear muffled sobs and the crackle of broken speakers still humming in the background. Her head throbbed, but she was alive. She turned to her right. Jacob was beside her, coughing, his face pale but breathing. They were still inside the Bataclan, but the room had changed completely. The air smelled of metal and burned wires. Emma looked toward the stage where police had taken cover behind fallen speakers. The sound of gunfire came again, sharp and deafening. It felt endless. A battle between the attackers and the police fighting to take control. Every second felt like forever. Jacob pulled Emma toward a row of side doors that led to a narrow hallway backstage. There, survivors whispered to one another in fear. Some were injured, others shaking silently, their fate, because covered in tears and dust. A young Frenchman tried to call his family, but the line was dead. "No service," he muttered in panic, "and no service anywhere." Outside, the Paris police had surrounded the theatre. SWAT teams moved into position, shields up, hearts racing. They didn't know how many attackers were inside or how many people were still alive. Helicopters circled above, their bright lights sweeping across the building's shattered windows. It was no longer just a crime scene. It was a war zone in the middle of the city. Inside the dark hallways, Emma tried to steady her breathing. She thought about home, about her mother, who had begged her not to go out that night. "Paris is safe," Emma had said earlier that evening with a laugh. Now she wasn't sure of anything anymore. The noise outside grew louder. Officers shouted commands in French, followed by bursts of gunfire. Then silence. A long, heavy silence that made everyone freeze. For a few seconds, it seemed like it was finally over. People began whispering, praying, holding one another. But then, from deeper inside the theatre came the sound of footsteps. Slow, heavy, getting closer, Emma and Jacob exchanged a terrified glance. The police weren't there yet. Whoever was walking toward them wasn't there to save them. And when the shadow appeared at the end of the hallway, the glint of metal in his hand told them exactly what was coming next. The shadow stepped closer, each footstep echoing against the concrete walls like a drumbeat of fear. Emma's heart pounded so loudly she thought it would give her away. The man's silhouette grew clearer in the dim red emergency light. Tall, wearing dark clothes, carrying a rifle. Jacob gripped her arm, whispering, "Don't move." They ducked behind a broken amplifier, holding their breath. The gunman paused, scanning the hallway. For a moment, time stood still. Then a sharp command rang out. "Police!" A deafening burst of gunfire followed. Sparks flew as bullets hit metal. The SWAT team had finally breached the entrance. The sound was unbearable. Shouting, chaos, and the heavy thud of boots running through smoke. Emma covered her ears as Jacob pulled her deeper backstage, crawling over shattered glass and fallen cables. She couldn't see anything except flashes of light from gunfire and the blinking exit sign ahead. Finally, they reached a side door leading to a narrow staircase. They stumbled down, choking on dust, their lungs burning. As they reached the lower floor, they found a group of survivors huddled together. One of them was a police officer, blood on his sleeve, motioning them to stay quiet. "We're almost clear," he whispered, his voice trembling but steady. Outside, the streets of Paris had transformed. Ambulances lined the block. Police cars flashed blue and red, painting the night sky in colour. Reporters were already gathering, filming the horror from behind barricades. People who had escaped stood in shock, their faces pale, their clothes torn. Some cried, some just stared at the theatre, unable to speak. Inside, the police closed in. The final exchange of fire lasted only a few minutes, but it felt like an eternity. When the gunfire finally stopped, there was an eerie silence, the kind that only comes after something unimaginable. One by one, survivors were led out through the main door. Emma walked with Jacob, her hands trembling, her mind numb. The cold air outside hit her face like a reminder that she was still alive. As she looked back at the Bataclan, its once beautiful facade scarred and broken, tears filled her eyes. She thought of the people who hadn't made it out, strangers she had sung beside just hours earlier. Reporters shouted questions, police radios crackled, and sirens wailed in the distance. But amid all the noise, one thought echoed in her mind. The night that had started with music and laughter had ended in silence and blood. It would forever be remembered as the night of blood. If this story shook you, the next will haunt you, so subscribe. The darkest crimes are just emerging,